We are talking about shame, and shame can be a little heavy. Some of that stuff is stuff that you've carried around for a long time, that I've carried around for a long time. But I want to encourage you, while I go through the message, while I go through the word, to be present. I know there's a lot going on. There's probably going to be some food cooking in the back, and you're going to be drifting off to like, oh, that smells so good. But if you can just engage with me for 25 minutes-ish, we will get through this together. Shame is a weird thing. Shame is an emotion. It's identity warping, though, because shame takes us from a place where we were to a different place. It's not the same as guilt. Guilt is, what I did was bad. Shame is, I am bad. What I did is bad. I am bad. You see the difference there? We connect what happened to what we did, and therefore we get shame. Shame is something that is not easily put down, though. We're going to talk about some things that happened to me a long time ago. We're going to have like a group session, and I'm going to be the only one talking. It's going to be so much fun. I might bring you up and some of you sit with me here. It sounds like this, though. I did bad, I sinned, so I am sin. I did bad, I am bad. She or he rejected me, so I'm really nothing. They didn't protect me, so I'm worthless. They hurt me instead of protecting me, so I'm really not lovable. I'm not a lovable person. And some of these things we pick up in childhood and we carry with us for a long, long time. We pick up these self-limiting beliefs and these ideas. And remember, we said shame is identity warping, not like the Cool Warp in sci-fi. It doesn't take you from here and push you there. It takes you from here and brings you backwards. If any of you are good at construction, when you go and you look for a 2x4, you want a straight 2x4. I have picked out enough 2x4s in my life that I never want to do it again with my dad. Warped. Warped. Where are they getting these from? I don't know. Warped. Keep going on and on, but it was warped. They're not the way they should be. So, like I said, we're going to act like we're in a group, and I'm going to start. You don't have to volunteer. I'm not going to let you do that. But I want to bring you back to a time when I was in 5th grade. And, well, I'm going to bring you back to 3rd grade, actually, because 3rd grade was a really good year when I kicked the door open and said, I'm here, and I've told you some of that story before, and then I made it to the principal's office. So I was late. I literally kicked the door open and said, I'm here, and she's like, go. So that was a bad thing, I guess. So principal's office, 5th grade, ended up there again, different principal, same office. I did something wrong then. And that now let's go to high school. And there's a lot of other stuff that I'm not telling you just because there's little ears in the room. Like, I don't want to tell you everything about me. We can have coffee if you want to do that. But in high school, I was pretty good at not going to class. I was very good at not doing homework. I was pretty good at fighting. So all of those things were not good. And eventually, you're not a good student. So you probably shouldn't go to college. And you shouldn't go to college. And you're really good at fighting, but you're in the principal's office. So now you're a fighter. Okay. Do you see how easy that is to all of a sudden pick these things up? Over and over and over. And you have those same stories. Yours might not be the same as mine. Hopefully they weren't, but some of you may. Some of you may have a secret, and your secret may be, you know what, I'm so bad with money. I am in terrible debt. And Christmas is coming. And Christmas a lot of times means if you're in debt, you're going to be in more debt by the time January 1 rolls around. You may have problems in the past with sexual sins, with lust, with addictions, with problems and sins that you haven't overcame and you started a long time ago. But because you've started that and you haven't understood how to really work through that and understand that if you are saved and if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, then those sins are forgiven and you can walk out of that. You may name yourself like, well, I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm hurt, I'm flawed, I'm dirty, I'm ugly. You may even say, I'm unlovable. People can't love me because of what I've done or things in my past. Those things, again, we don't drop them easily, and they start to add up in life. And have you ever noticed that when things like that happen, you start, even if it's not a conscious way, your brain does these weird things to try to make up for it. There's 3 ways it shows up that we're going to talk about. I'm not even going to talk about addictions because addictions is one of those big things that things in the past come up and we try to self-medicate with addictions. But the first thing I want to talk about is we're very vulnerable to being a perfectionist. We attempt to silence our shame with error-free performances. No one in this room, I'm sure, ever does that. Never. You don't want to be perfect. No perfectionist that I know 10 of you right now just off the top of my head. I'm not saying that shame is your issue, but I'm saying that when we have shame, we find it difficult to admit to failure because it brings us back to that shame point. And nobody really wants to feel that way, so what we do is we strive for perfection. Everything has to be perfect. I have to match all the time. I've got to do everything just so perfect. So you can't say to me, hey, Pastor Jim, what about this thing? I realized a long time ago, I don't have the answer for all of your questions. I just don't. I don't have the answer for all of your problems other than Jesus Christ. I just don't. And that's okay. But if I strive for perfection day in and day out, every time you ask me a question, I'm going to feel this immense pressure to get it right so that I don't have to go back into the principal's office or to the skipping of the class office or to the fighting chair or to, I don't know that I got a dunce cap. I know someone got a dunce cap in here. That's ruthless. But you can see the dunce cap is the way the perfect place for shame. That's not okay. And then we have to deal with that eventually. The next way that we try to deal with it is we are very critical of ourselves. Did that wrong. And then you become critical of other people. You become so critical of other people that they really don't want to spend time with you. Because we see our faults, and we all have faults. We are all messed up. Can we agree with that? We're all messed up. We are all sinners saved by grace through faith on a path to know Jesus better, to love God, and to love people. But you still have faults. And we see some of our faults in other people, and when you see your other faults in them, it makes you mad at them. But it's really you. You're really mad at yourself. Parents, you know when you see your kids do something that really bothers you and you know it's from you and you get way more upset than you really, it's a crazy reaction because they do something that you've done before? Just no one here, I guess. That's shame. That is your shame. It's okay to say it's okay. It's okay. We're all together here. We're not doing group if you're worried. We're not doing group. But what happens is we become we're perceived as self-righteous or arrogant. Well, look at them. They're not doing everything perfect. Oh, I would have done that different. Oh, man. Can you do that better next time, son, daughter? The next thing we do is we use these self-defeating thoughts. I'm sure, again, no one in this room has ever done this. I'm probably speaking to the wrong church right now. I should be down the road somewhere. But we have these self-defeating thoughts, and we use them as a form of protection and escape. We focused on the worst possible outcome. Doesn't matter what's going on. When you plan your day, when you plan going out with someone, you are planning the worst possible outcome. Has anyone ever done that? I appreciate we've got one honest person in here. I've got you. She's being honest. Thank you. But we do that. We might have something really good that's going to happen. You might have a new job lined up, and instead of actually accepting that position, that offer, you bounce out. You're like, no, I don't want that. You guys got a problem. I don't want to do that. Or you're starting a new relationship, and instead of weighing the pros and the cons, you start to make decisions that just kill the relationship right away. And you might not even know that you're doing that. So if you see a pattern of destruction in the rearview mirror, you might want to look at this a little bit more. But we basically end up sabotaging possibilities and opportunities in our life. And we do that so that we can control it. Another thing that we can control. Remember, all of the things that I just talked about, we don't set them down for December. December is a great time. We started the service playing The Grinch, which was way longer than I thought. But we started with that, right? Because it's a time of chocolate, and it's holidays, and we don't set these things down that we've battled with for 11 months and then pick them up in January. We do. No, we don't. We try to, and we try to do that because we become more stressed, and then there's this thing, December, everything has to be perfect. I'm so glad I'm not in a new relationship, right? New relationships, like the holidays are like, it's amazing. Like, it used to be like, hey, it's Christmas, I guess I'm gonna buy you something, whatever. First Christmas ornament, there's sweaters, there's this huge deal. There's a big expectation. For those of you that are in early relationships and it's your first one, don't overdo it. I'm just saying, don't overdo it, because you might have more firsts. I'm just saying. But December becomes a driver and pulls these things out. Everything's got to be perfect. We have this stress and we have these expectations. But we go into that with a sense of warped identity because of shame. And we don't know what it is. And then we add a little bit of stress to the mix. And then sometimes we add a little other chemicals to the mix. And then all of a sudden, it's Christmas time. And you are starting just a normal conversation. And that conversation goes to conflict. And the conflict goes to screaming and yelling. What happened? And all of a sudden, Dad's in the corner. He gets drunk because he doesn't want to deal with it. He's self-medicating in the corner. It's not funny if you've seen that happen. But it does happen, doesn't it? Sometimes our in-laws and our parents become very critical of how we're raising our kids. Remember the three things we just talked about? Hypercritical. Well, I would do it this way. I wouldn't buy them that Christmas gift. Oh, I wouldn't give them that much sugar. Oh, okay, well, they're not yours. They're not. But everything starts to look like it's under a microscope, and then we start to act out. It happens often because our inside battle with shame comes out like the Incredible Hulk. It does. We don't know that's what it is, but then we apologize. We're like, oh, everything good? Yeah, everything's good. Next year, you're already thinking about last year, because last year was not the best Christmas you've ever had, and it should have been. But until we deal with those things, it's going to keep coming up over and over again. The good news is for us, if we are believers, is that we don't have to leave things there. We don't have to repeat this over and over and over, because you know God. And because of the relationship that you have with Jesus Christ, there is hope. And it is not his plan for you to live in shame. I'm going to say that again. It is not his plan that you live in shame. You are not winning any Christian awards by living in shame. There's no merit badges or Awana badges for that. It's supposed to be left at the cross. If you do something after you've met Jesus, then we are supposed to confess it and then move on. Very simple. Let's go back into the Old Testament. And there's this verse in Isaiah. Isaiah 54 reads like this. It says, do not be afraid. You will not be put to shame. Do not fear disgrace. You will not be humiliated. You will forget the shame of your youth and remember no more the reproach of your widowhood. Now, why is he saying that? Why does he say you're going to forget the shame? Because they came out of slavery and they were carrying that with them, and they had such a hard time letting go of the past. The past is the past. It is so important because we don't have to live in shame. You don't have to live in shame. And some of you are like, wow, I did not plan for this morning. I thought there were going to be camels even walking around out there. Camels are later, shame is now. Just so you know, if you've gotten mixed up, you're at the wrong place. They're going to be later. 1 John 1:9, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Confessing is not easy. It's not. It's not an easy thing to do. Even to God sometimes. That word confess means to admit, to declare and say, you know what, God, I was wrong. I missed the mark. You have a holy standard for my life, and I messed up. That's what that is. That is not saying, oh, it's okay. I'm asking you for forgiveness, God, but you're pretty tough on us. No, that's not it. It's not saying, I'm going to ask you for forgiveness, but because I'm a new covenant believer, I can do what I want anyway. Church, we are called to be holy. And if you don't know what that looks like, spend some time in Galatians chapter 5. Works of the flesh, works of the Spirit. We are supposed to be having works of the Spirit. But when we confess, we are openly admitting to God that we have done something wrong, and we are owning that. Sometimes we have to own that. And then he says, once we confess, he is faithful. Is he supposed to be faithful and just if you don't confess? If you don't confess, this is a math problem here. It's a formula. You confess, he is faithful. If you don't confess, what does he have to do? You haven't taken the step yet. And then you carry that stuff around over and over and over. I think that would be a scripture that most of us could probably be like, yeah, I agree with that. That's a common scripture, right? 1 John 1:9. You can read that chapter. It talks about righteousness and light and dark. But because shame has worked its way in and we have identified with it and we have held on to it, it's not that easy. Remember in the Old Testament, God's chosen people, the Israelites, they were slaves for a long time, like 430 years. That's such a long time that they didn't know anyone who wasn't a slave when they talked to their fellow Israelites. They didn't know anyone. What are you doing today? I'm a slave. I'm doing the same thing that I've done forever. I've done the same thing that my grandfather and his grandfather and maybe even his grandfather has done for a long, long time. They woke up out of bed. They knew they were a slave. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, 430 years of being oppressed and being told that you were good for nothing other than doing what someone else told you to do. Now, I don't know what your idea is of slavery in the Old Testament, but it was no picnic. A lot of things that happened were not written down because it was so bad. But then God raised up this guy, and his name was what? Moses. And Moses said, what did he say to Pharaoh? Let my people go. And Pharaoh's like, whatever. And Moses is like, no, I'm serious. They are not meant to be slaves because of who they are. They are not meant to be slaves. The same way with us. We are not meant to be slaves to shame because of who we know. So what happens is God delivers them, they literally walk out. Pharaoh's like, take all your stuff. Take more. Just get out of here. They grumble a little bit on the way out because they still have some slavery shame going on. There's no doubt about that. They watch their enemies defeated in front of them. Red Sea. It's an amazing miracle. You would think after that they'd be like, no shame for me. Clearly God has a plan for us. They didn't. They left Egypt, they were out of Egypt, but Egypt was not out of them. They couldn't stop. Their thoughts kept going back and forth. And sometimes with us, we've been forgiven by Jesus Christ, by his act on the cross. We've been forgiven, but we still live with shame-based thinking. That ain't right, guys. It's not. That's not something that we need to carry. Can I tell you this? Life is hard enough without that. We'd call that a brick that you're carrying that you can set down at the feet of the cross. Because we are still believing something, even though God says that you are not that. That sounds crazy to me. But we do this all the time, don't we? And they did this when they came out of Egypt. They were acting like they still had a mentality of a slave because that's all they knew. And even though they were delivered, it took them time to see this. Sometimes we need to quit thinking about what I'm not. I'm not perfect. I'm not this. But we have to focus on who Christ is. I will tell you this until I'm done being your pastor. It is not all about you. It is all about Jesus. So when we take that and we look to the cross and we look to see what Jesus did, that is when you will see change. Until then, you're always going to look in the mirror and see something that's not perfect. Now, I'm not saying that any time that you see something bad in yourself, there's not a little bit of truth to it. I'm not saying you're 100% perfect. Because, think about this. I've sinned. Actually, yes, I'm a sinner. That's why Jesus died for me. I can't do it all. That's okay. I don't have to do it all. I'm inadequate to do everything that's on my plate most weeks. But that's when other people can help. And that's more of a biblical view. I'm not designed to do it all. Sometimes you might think, I'm just rude. Yeah, you are. Quit being rude. But as long as you focus on yourself, you will never be enough. I'm not bad. Because of Christ, I'm forgiven. Do you see the difference there? I'm not sick. Because of Christ, I am healed. I'm not broken. Because of Christ, I am new. I'm not unlovable. Because of Christ, I am loved. You may need to have a journal and have some of these because of Christ statements written down. So when these thoughts come into your head, I am not blank. Whatever it is that you're carrying around, you write that down. I am not whatever, but because of Christ, I am the answer there. Remember the Israelites, 430 years. God sets them free. They're out of Egypt. Egypt is not out of them. They are out of slavery, but in their minds and in their hearts, they are still in bondage. They are in bondage to the shame of the past. And then in Joshua chapter 5, God says something to them. He says this. This is years after they're actually free. And the Lord said this to Joshua. He said, today, line in the sand, today is the day that you are free. He said, today, not tomorrow. Sometimes we're waiting to be free tomorrow, or we're free after we do X amount of weeks of counseling, or we start a medication or something like that. He doesn't say that. He says, you are free. I have rolled away the shame of your slavery in Egypt. Today, I've rolled it away. Today, at this time, there will be no more shame. It's powerful. No more shame. I picture in my mind that God is just like pulling back a filter and throwing it away. And they don't have a shame filter on them anymore. They have a filter of who they were created to be as God's people.